Here we go.
Okay, we are good to go.
Okay, I'll call our work session to order. First thing this evening will be the approval of the minutes from our September 29th meeting. Were there any questions or comments on those?
We're good to go.
Okay, I'll call our work session to. Go ahead, Dennis.
I sent in one comment. It was on page 4, and it had to do around the 6th paragraph. And it was a discussion about the gas pumps. And it starts out by saying that I suggested angling the canopy. And I did not say that, but I remember I was talking about them angling the gas pumps
Right.
under the canopy. So that would be whatever we have to do to modify that.
Is that too big for Scrivener's, Mr. Sluice, or are we?
I think so, yes.
You just make it the gas pump configuration, maybe.
All right, well, Dennis, you can make a motion when we get there. Anything
Sorry,
else?
I
Go
did
ahead.
not mute myself there, but I think that can be treated as Scrivener's unless someone,
I think it's very pertinent, yeah.
I'd be more comfortable if we just changed it.
okay.
That's fine. Since you're the Scrivener, we want to make sure that
Yes.
we're not attributing the error to you. Anything else on the minutes? All right. Next up will be the Town and Country Market, 3 items there. And Mr. Spencer, I think this needs to be continued again this evening.
Correct, Chairman. The applicants requested a continuance. We had our first architectural review board meeting October 4th. Had a lot of good feedback. The canopy was a major discussion point in the design of it and the look of it, and they wanted that fleshed out. And then as well, different items related to the building, such as awnings, landscaping. So, they continue to work to take that feedback.
I'm sorry, was that ARB or just a meeting in the
Architecture Review Board. Yeah, they had the first
Okay.
meeting with Architecture Review Board, October 4th. So
Okay.
that was a good discussion, but they still need more time. We're hoping to have this in November for you guys. They will have a representative here this evening in case there's any feedback that you all would like to give. But the request is to continue the public hearing and these items.
So we'll need someone to make a motion for that, right?
So we'll move to continue it and leave the hearing open until our November
17th.
17th meeting. Okay. Mr. Malin Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it might be helpful, Ryan, if you inform the rest of the commission about the conversation that you and I had just recently, wherein you forwarded to me 5 examples of how gas station canopies can be done in a manner that is more, if you will, pleasing to view and probably more congruent with a residential location. I found that helpful, but perhaps the rest of the commissioners should at least be aware of what you have done in terms of providing some assistance to the applicant.
So following the ARB meeting, I did some research. I used Google Street View and looked around the St. Louis area, and I found a couple good examples of canopies that incorporated brick columns and non industrial style roof decking. I also looked at Chicagoland area. They have several good examples up there that are more in keeping with a residential area. So I sent those to the applicant to review, and I was going to provide those to the ARB at their following meeting. That item will probably be continued as well because it's coming up in a week and a half. But I can also forward that to the planning and zoning commissioners if you'd all like to see it prior to our meeting on the 17th. But there are different options. It doesn't have to be just a basic canopy like what we see out today.
Do we have, I note that, so there are a couple people on this month's session that were not on last month's. Do we need to say anything about them listening to recording or anything like that?
Will the recording even
yes.
be available till after oh, people, I see. People, the
So I
commission
know
unit.
Fred, I think Jeff, you weren't here
Yes.
last time.
Yeah, kudos to Laura. She reminded me by email 10 days ago that I needed to review the public hearing, which I have done, and I'll state that in the meeting so it's part of the record.
Okay. And then what about you, Alderman Whitmire?
Likewise.
Okay, so I'll just, at a certain point, if you could just, ask for the floor and just make a statement about that for both of you, please. All right. Anything else on this item or these three items?
So do we, just a quick question, do we see us spending time on this, or is it going to be just a quick conversation to have two people say that they've listened to the recording and then move them to the next meeting?
The question would be, what we did on the last session was we used it as an opportunity for the commission to provide feedback to the applicant. So I don't know if Alderman Whitmire or Mr. Malin Smith want to take this opportunity to do that. I think it would be appropriate. So.
Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciate that invitation, and I would like to stick my oar in the water on this matter. And let me give my fellow commissioners a little bit of a heads up. I got a very, I thought, compelling phone call from a Ward 1 resident. Fellow is very familiar with city government, in fact, has served in town and country government, and he raised some concerns about the project that I'd like to articulate just to provide relevant resident feedback.
Okay, we'll definitely have an opportunity to do that. Okay, next item is the boundary adjustment plat on Wheatley.
Yes, sir. The owner, Christopher Grow, owns the 3 lots on Wheatley Grove Road. The center lot is the location of his home. He would like to adjust the boundary between his lot that he currently occupies and the lots to the north slightly. That will allow room for him to place a sport court on his property at a future point in time. I would note that I had a typo in the memo. I said the sport court would go on 12211 Wheatley Grove Road. That's a vacant lot to the north. It's actually 12200, which is where his house is located. So this is merely just shifting a boundary and adjusting about 3,700 square feet between the 2 lots.
Any questions on item 4?
Just a clarification for me, Ryan.
So-
What is the need for the boundary adjustment in order to install a sport court? I don't understand the connection.
Well, he's increasing the size of his lot and shifting the boundary over, which gives him more room, because you have setbacks in place and green space requirements. So by increasing the size of his existing lot that he lives on and shifting that boundary, it makes it more conducive to to legally install a sport court without maybe a variance or
Okay.
relief from the code.
I thought he was subdividing.
No.
I think you already did that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just merely a slight shifting of the lot line.
All right. Thank you for that.
All right, next two items will be the record plat and improvement plans for Greystone. Finally come back in front of us.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a few months. May of 2020 is when this body approved the preliminary plat. They did ask for an extension. In April of this year, they were having delays with MSD approvals. So tonight they're coming forward with all their improvement plans. They've got their MSD approvals. They've got their Missouri American water contract, their estimated cost of improvements. Ed has looked at and approved the indentures. They made all the revisions that he's required. So tonight is the approval of the improvement plans by this body, and then you'll make a recommendation for the record plat, which would then go on to the Board of Aldermen. And then following that, the developer is then able to submit for a site improvement plan and begin construction of the 3-lot subdivision.
Got it. So we'll consider those together and then vote on them separately. 5 and 6. Any questions on 5 and 6?
Just
Mr. Malin Smith?
thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, I'm assuming that the detail that's been provided by Frontenac Forestry is a result of the fairly recent ordinance that requires this kind of study, and also including the identification of grand trees. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had the privilege of participating in the drafting of that before I retired, so I was pleased to see that it's part of the package. I have to say that I was disappointed to see that every tree except 4 are found to be undesirable. And I wanted to visit that site and failed to do so. So I don't have any personal observation, but I hope that the evaluation of the trees as being unacceptable and in need of removal isn't an outgrowth of just being convenient, because that's where the road and the homes are designed to be. Because as I tried to compare the positioning of the homes and the trees, there seem to be a couple that could be salvageable if indeed they're worthwhile. But it's just disturbing to me that every tree on the entire lot, save 3 in the far one corner, are found to be undesirable. Any perspective you can provide would be helpful.
There was extensive conversations between myself and Frontenac Forestry. The original plan had a few trees evaluated, which I thought were in better condition than they were shown, and they actually went back and reevaluated and agreed with me. But Frontenac Forestry is has a very good reputation, and folks that work there are all certified arborists. So when they stamp a plan, I take it for what it states. And they went out and talked to me about the condition and the appearance. And while it looks like a healthy tree, it's not inside the tree. Unfortunately, for the trees in the southwest corner, the way the water flows on the site, that's where the MSD facility needs to go, and that's where a lot of those trees needed to be removed to meet MSD requirements. They did note the grand trees. They are putting back 16 trees to mitigate that. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. In terms of how the lot lays out and where the street has to go, that's a situation at hand.
Alderman Whitmire, I think you had your hand up earlier.
No, I was probably just waving around. I'm sorry.
All right, Mr. Bolzino.
Fred, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but the diseased trees, Well, number one, Ryan, did the arborist determine that any part of this lot is a woodland?
No,
So
they
we're,
determined there wasn't.
so we're not dealing with a woodland and those kind of restrictions. So, and under our tree ordinance of last year, as I recall, that they're certainly allowed to remove anything that is diseased.
Correct.
And there are several things in their ledger that are indicated as fair, and they're removing them, but there's no restriction on their removal. Is that correct?
The only restriction is if it's over 20 inches as a grand tree, they're required to mitigate that with some new trees.
Correct. So even though they've chosen to remove fair trees, there's no, even if it was a good tree, they could remove it, so long as it's not in a woodland and so long as it's not a grand tree.
Correct. And even a grand tree, they can, again, remove, but they have to mitigate.
Remove and replace.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly happy with the result, but I don't think we've legislated against it.
Yeah, please don't misunderstand me. I'm unhappy with the result as well, but I'm not an arborist, so I'm not questioning the expert's evaluation. I'm just very sensitive to attempting to preserve trees whenever possible, because in the past, the city has gotten very significant negative pushback when developers have clear-cut lots, most notably 2 lots on Mason Road South.
Mr. McKnight?
Just, I mean, the disappointment I see is that they're removing a whole bunch of trees, and it looks like, I mean, if I'm correct, Ryan, tell me if I'm wrong here, they're replacing trees along the road. So there's no way that's going to grow into a grove. It's just going to be several trees along the roadway in a small space. It's not going to replace and come back with some type of woodland option at some point. I mean,
yeah, and those are the trees for the subdivision. The 3 lots will have their own requirements. The 3 lots will have to have 6 overstory, 6 understory, 60 shrubs, 66 evergreens.
so there will likely be a buffer between those houses and the houses in Thornhill when we get down to it.
Yeah, with 3 lots, so that's 8. That's 18 more overstory trees.
Okay. Okay, that's better. That's better for me as far as I look at that. So, okay, good.
Any other questions of staff on 5 and 6? Dr. Mel?
Yeah, there is a grand tree that's on lot 1, silver maple, I think, yeah, which is listed as fair. It seems like it makes the lot more valuable to have a nice tree like that, and it's probably not within the building footprint. It's right at the margin, but we have to let the fair grand trees go, I guess. Is that right, Ryan?
Well, they're allowed to remove them. They have to mitigate a certain caliper percentage. Q1 though is shown as, yeah, it's shown as a grand tree. You know, it's a question for the developer. You know, can you attempt to save that tree, or is the grading of the lot going to overrun the root system? And it is somewhat central to where how that lot is laid out. Unfortunately, I mean, we've had this discussion when we talked about the natural resource update. We require 1 acre lots. We require the roads and right of way to be a certain width, and the cul-de-sac to be a certain radius, and that starts to hem in what you're creatively allowed to do with a lot. You know, we don't really allow for, other than through our suburban low, suburban medium process, you know, more creative design to allow for more common ground that can preserve, like in Manderley. So, you know, with 3.5 acres or so that they're working with here, or 4.5 acres, they're somewhat limited where how the roads can go and then the lot sizes can meet our requirements. So it's unfortunate, but it's kind of the way it's set up.
We do have just a couple minutes left. If there's any other questions of staff that you feel we can't address in the session, go ahead. Otherwise, I'd like to move on to our next item. Alderman Whitmire.
Chairman, if I could, just real quickly. So are we changing the designation of this property in the sense of whether it's a state or suburban estate? We are not, correct?
No,
Okay.
it's suburban estate. This is just a plating exercise that
Yes.
meets zoning and our subdivision plan.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 7 is the zoning text amendment on residential driveway gates. Any questions of staff on item 7? Mr. McKnight?
Question here, is this being prompted by the fire department or anything like that? Where did this come from?
This was at the request of our aldermanic liaison, Mr. Whitmire. It's based on the 2 gates that we most recently saw come through this commission. After they went to Board of Aldermen discussions, back and forth, we basically realized that 30 feet is really more of a better number because of the length of ambulances in certain types of delivery trucks. 25 is not necessarily adequate to meet all of those kind of daily basic type vehicles that may try to pull in front of a gate. So the thinking was to set the minimum at 30 feet, and then we could accommodate basically every type of delivery vehicle or emergency ambulance.
So, but again, does this come back to something from the fire department saying that they needed this, or is this just something that we're kind of?
Alderman Whitmire, would you like to address that? I mean, actually, this discussion might be more
That's fine.
appropriate in the actual session, but
Yeah, so I can net it out. This whole thing was brought forward just based on my witnessing conversations at the Board of Aldermen and at this meeting.
Okay.
And I can explain that in more detail at the regular meeting, if that's okay.
item 8 is another zoning text amendment, the portable storage and dumpsters. Questions on 8?
Just a quick one.
Go ahead, Mr. McKnight.
I was just noticing that I started writing notes on this, and then I realized the H provision makes this so none of these pertain if somebody has a building permit they're working on. So I think that's I guess I'm trying to figure out again where this what the idea came from, and we can talk about it in the meeting, but
Yep.
but I'm trying to think. I was thinking of options as to where this would be an issue. And I think it's all pretty much resolved by the exemption on H, because anyone who's got a building permit can put things not on concrete, and they can put things in lots of places, and they can put mold and asbestos and those types of things in here, because those would all be building permit issues. So I was thinking of that as what the problems would be, but I can net that out in the meeting.
Ms. Mueller?
I'm just gonna have a question about the length requirements. I noticed that there's, I think, you can only have a maximum, isn't it?
40 yard.
Here. Yeah, 22 feet in length. I guess I see sort of an issue with there being you can only have one unit on there, but in the maximum is 22. I guess what's the problem, for example, if somebody wants to have 2 smaller units that don't exceed 22 feet in length, and for example, they'd be filling up one, sending it, using another one. I foresee it like people using them for projects where they are doing a short-term project in their home, need to take furniture out of the house or something like that and put it somewhere while they're redoing a floor or something and then putting it in. And, it could be that they need to have some flexibility in doing that.
You're absolutely right. Yes. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I drove by a certain commissioner's house today on Kent Manor, and I saw 2 pods in the driveway across from her house. So yeah, I can see what you're saying.
3.
Oh, there's 3. Okay. I was 2. So yeah, that's a good thing to talk about for sure.
I mean, it could be even too like the kind of project involved. I mean, if you've got somebody who's doing a short-term interior project, they may not be able to do it in 14 days, but it's certainly not a situation where it's going to be out there for months and months. I mean, some flexibility might be needed. That's kind of what I was
The point
foreseeing.
is, we don't have any regulations. So what's the
Yeah.
right,
Right.
what's the right fit?
Alderman Whitmire?
Just two things real quickly. One, we don't have to do either of these things, right? So I brought these back to you guys to consider and think about. And if you don't want to do anything, that's fine. And then two, I think these are ripe for continuance in the sense that they're very fresh topics.
Right.
And if you do decide to move forward, it might make sense to continue them. You could continue them for quite some time. Just two thoughts.
I get it though. I could see where it could be an unsightly situation like Sheila was talking about.
Be permanent storage.
Yeah, I get it.
Yep. All right, we have 2 minutes to make it to our next session. So why don't we adjourn, and we'll see you on the other Zoom in